You ever take a babysitting job thinking it's going to be easy cash? Some pizza, a few cartoons, maybe a bedtime story, then a quiet night scrolling on your phone until the parents get home. That's what I thought too. But that night, in that house, I learned something that still makes my stomach twist when I think about it. Because they forgot to tell me one rule, and breaking it almost killed me. It started on a rainy Saturday evening, the kinda rain that turns everything silver under the streetlight, the kind that makes you want to stay inside with a blanket. Mrs. Parker had called me earlier in the week, asking if I could babysit her 6-year-old son, Ethan. I'd done plenty of babysitting gigs before, so I said yes without a second thought. The Parkers lived in the nicer part of town, in one of those old Victorian houses with too many windows and a porch that creaked under your feet. When I pulled up, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the street strangely quiet. No barking dogs, no cars, no kids playing, just silence, broken only by the rain tapping on my umbrella. Mr. Parker answered the door, tall and serious, with the kind of handshake that feels like he's testing you. Mrs. Parker hovered behind him, smiling too much, like she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. "Thank you for coming," she said quickly. "We don't usually go out, but tonight's important." "No problem," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I've babysat tons of kids. I'll take good care of him." She exchanged a glance with her husband. Something unsaid passed between them. Ethan ran into the hallway then, clutching a toy truck, his hair sticking up in wild tufts. He looked like any other 6-year-old, bright-eyed, shy, but curious. Dinner was already set out on the counter. Mac and cheese, cut up apples, juice boxes. They gave me the rundown. Bedtime was 9. No TV after 8. Lights out in his room. Simple enough, but then, as they grabbed their coats, Mr. Parker stopped in the doorway and looked at me like he wanted to say something. His jaw worked, but the words didn't come. Finally, Mrs. Parker touched his arm and said, "We'll be back by midnight. You'll be fine." And then they left. The house felt bigger without them. The rain picked up outside, rattling against the windows. Ethan ate dinner quietly, then asked if we could build Legos in the living room. Easy. Normal? Hours slipped by, but around 8:30, just as I was thinking about starting his bedtime routine, Ethan looked up at me with those wide brown eyes and asked, "Did they tell you the rule?" I blinked. "The rule," he nodded seriously, lowering his voice. "The one about the man in the hall." Every hair on my arm stood up. "What man?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Ethan leaned closer. "If you hear footsteps after 9 o'clock, You can't open the door. You can't talk. You just have to wait until it's over." My mouth went dry. I tried to laugh it off. "That's creepy. Did your dad tell you that?" He shook his head. "No." The house told me. I stared at him, unsure if this was some elaborate game or just a kid's imagination running wild. "Okay, buddy, time for bed." But as I tucked him in, his little hands grabbed mine with surprising strength. His voice trembled. "Please, don't break the rule." That was the moment I realized he wasn't joking, and for the first time that night, I felt truly afraid. I sat in the rocking chair by Ethan's bed, waiting for him to drift off. The rain tapped steadily against the window, a rhythm that should have been soothing, but all I could think about was his whispered warning. "If you hear footsteps after 9 o'clock, don't look. Don't open the door. Don't talk." I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Kids made up weird stuff all the time. Maybe he'd overheard his parents telling a scary story, or maybe it was just his way of stalling bedtime. But the way his eyes had filled with fear, that was harder to shake. By 9, Ethan was asleep, his chest rising and falling under his dinosaur blanket. I slipped out of the room, leaving the door cracked just enough to hear if he woke up. Downstairs, I curled up on the couch with my phone, Netflix, scrolling. Normal stuff, but the house didn't feel normal anymore. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. 9:15. The floorboards upstairs groaned. I froze. It sounded exactly like footsteps. Slow, heavy, pacing the hallway just outside Ethan's room. My throat tightened. It had to be the house settling. Old houses made noise, right? But then the steps came again. Deliberate, dragging, moving from one end of the hall to the other. I stood halfway up, heart racing, torn between going to check and staying put. That's when I remembered Ethan's warning. Don't look. Don't open the door. Don't talk. A joke, I told myself. Just a kid's imagination, but my feet refused to move. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy. I sank back onto the couch, hugging a pillow to my chest. My eyes never left the ceiling. 9:30. The footsteps started again. This time, they reached the top of the stairs. My whole body went rigid. I swear I could see a shadow stretching across the landing, though no light should have been there to cast it. Then, slowly, the steps descended, one at a time. Each groan of the stair echoed through the house, closer, closer. I wanted to call out Mr. Parker, Mrs. Parker. But Ethan's voice replayed in my mind. Don't talk. So I sat there, paralyzed. As the steps reached the bottom, the living room doorway was only a few feet away. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I could almost feel someone standing there, watching, just beyond the edge of my vision. I didn't look. The air grew colder. The TV remote slipped from my sweaty hands. The steps moved again, slow, dragging, circling the couch. My breath caught in my throat. Something brushed the back of my hair so light it could have been static, but it felt intentional. Tears burned my eyes. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood, forcing myself not to scream. Finally, after what felt like hours, the footsteps moved away. Back toward the stairs. Up, each groan of the wood receding until the house was silent again. I sat frozen, staring at nothing, until the clock on the wall clicked over to 10. That was when my phone buzzed. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a text from Mrs. Parker. Everything okay? My fingers shook as I typed back. Yeah, all good. What was I supposed to say? Hey, by the way, I think there's someone or something in your house. I wanted to believe it was over. That whatever it was, it only lasted an hour. Like some terrible ritual the house went through every night. But when I went upstairs to check on Ethan, I found him sitting up in bed, wide awake, eyes glassy with tears. You heard him, didn't you? He whispered. I swallowed hard. Ethan, what is he? His little voice trembled. I don't know, but he gets mad if you break the rule. I tucked him back in, pretending to be calm, though my hands were still shaking. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the hallway outside his room, clutching my phone like it was a weapon, listening to the silence stretch on. And all I could think was, what happens if someone does break the rule? The next morning, I made pancakes. That's what babysitters do, right? Normal, cheerful, sugary breakfasts. I poured way too much syrup on Ethan's plate, trying to cover the dark circles under his eyes with a smile. He didn't touch the pancakes. Instead, he poked the fork into the stack and whispered, You didn't see him, did you? I stiffened. See who? His eyes darted toward the ceiling, like he was afraid of being overheard. The man who walks after 9. I forced a laugh. Ethan, there's nobody here but us. Your parents will be back tonight. Everything's fine. But he didn't believe me. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he kept staring at the ceiling as though waiting for the sound of those heavy footsteps again. I dropped the subject, but it clung to me all day. By the time evening came, I was dreading 9 o'clock, like it was a death sentence. The sun dipped low, the house shadows stretched long, and that unease returned thick, suffocating, like the air before a thunderstorm. At 8:45, I tucked Ethan into bed. He gripped my wrist, his tiny hands surprisingly strong. Promise me you'll follow the rule, he begged. I promise. But I wasn't sure if I meant it. Downstairs, I left the lights on this time. Every lamp, every corner, glowing. But at 9, the first creak echoed down from upstairs. My blood froze. The footsteps returned, heavier than before, dragging slowly back and forth along the hallway. I pressed my palms over my ears, rocking in place, but it didn't matter. The sound thudded through the floorboards, into my bones. Then a silence so sharp it felt wrong. I lowered my hands, listened, waited, and then, for the first time, something different. A voice, faint, whispering, Help me. My whole body went cold. The voice came from upstairs, from Ethan's room. I leapt to my feet, heart pounding. Was Ethan awake? Crying for me? I reached the bottom of the stairs before I froze. The rule. Don't talk. Don't open the door. Don't look. But the voice sounded so much like Ethan's. Fragile. Begging. Please. Help. I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles ached. Finally, I forced myself to whisper, Ethan. The voice stopped. The air changed instantly like something had snapped into place. A floorboard above me groaned, followed by the slow drag of footsteps heading toward the top of the stairs. My stomach lurched. I'd broken the rule. Panicking, I ran back into the living room, flicking the TV on just for noise, for light, for anything. The footsteps descended. Closer. Closer. The air grew colder with each step, and then, at the base of the stairs, something shifted. Not in sight, I didn't dare look, but in the air, in the way the shadows bent across the walls. A low rasp filled the room, like someone breathing right behind me. I squeezed my eyes shut, my chest heaved, every instinct screaming at me to run, to look, to do something. But then, faintly, I heard Ethan's voice from upstairs. "Don't move," he whispered. I froze. The breathing crept closer. A hot, rancid gust brushed my ear, and I nearly sobbed. Then, slowly, the steps moved away, back toward the stairs. Up, 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 until silence swallowed the house again. I collapsed onto the couch, shaking uncontrollably. My throat felt raw, like I'd swallowed ice. When I dared to glance at the clock, it was 10. The hour was over, but the damage had been done. I'd broken the rule, and I knew whatever. The Parkers came home right at midnight. I must have looked like hell, because Mrs. Parker's smile faltered the second she saw me. "Is everything okay?" she asked. I wanted to scream at her, to demand why she hadn't told me about the rule, about the thing that walked her halls. But Ethan had come padding down the stairs in his pajamas, clutching her leg like nothing had happened. His eyes, though his eyes told the truth, he knew. So I forced a smile, grabbed my bag, and left without saying a word. The night air hit me like a slap. I thought I'd feel relief once I was out of that house, but the dread clung to me like cobwebs, even as I drove home. The silence in my car felt too heavy, too still. Like something had followed me. I barely slept. Every time the floor creaked or the wind rattled the windows, I snapped awake, convinced I'd hear those dragging footsteps. By morning, I told myself it was over. One weird night, one creepy babysitting gig. I'd never have to go back. Except 2 days later, Mrs. Parker called again. "We have another event this Friday," she said, her voice oddly strained. "Would you be available?" Every nerve in my body screamed to say no, but the words that came out were sure. I needed the money. And maybe, deep down, I wanted answers. Friday came faster than I liked. When I pulled up to the house, Ethan was waiting at the window, his face pale. Inside, Mr. Parker pulled me aside. His eyes darted around, making sure Ethan wasn't listening. "You followed the rule, right?" he asked. I opened my mouth, then shut it. "Finally," I managed. "Mostly." His face darkened. He gripped my arm hard. "You don't understand. If you break it, you're marked." "Ayankuto furi. Marked? What the hell is going on in this house?" Before he could answer, Mrs. Parker appeared, smiling too brightly again, ushering him out the door. The second they left, Ethan whispered, "You shouldn't have come back." I laughed nervously. "Why not?" He didn't answer. He just stared at the clock. 9 o'clock came like a death knell. This time, the footsteps didn't start upstairs. They started right outside the front door. The porch creaked. The doorknob rattled. My chest tightened. The door was locked, but locks didn't feel like enough. Then came the sound of nails long, scraping nails dragging slowly across the wood. Ethan grabbed my hand, squeezing until it hurt. "Don't open it," he whispered. "I wasn't planning on it," I muttered, but my voice shook. The nails scratched again, moving across the doorframe, then the windows. Scrape, scrape, circling the house. I pulled the curtains shut, but that only made the shadows worse. Then the kind that presses in on you, thick and unbearable. I held my breath, and then, from behind me, came a low whisper. "You looked." I spun around. No one was there. Ethan whimpered. "He knows your name now." My blood turned to ice. "What did you say?" Ethan's little face was pale, lips trembling. "He only says that to the ones who are marked." The whisper came again, closer this time, slithering around the room. "You looked." I clapped my hands over my ears, heart hammering, but the words sank in anyway, crawling into my mind like oil. "You looked." The lights flickered. One by one, the bulbs popped, plunging the house into darkness. Ethan screamed, and I grabbed him, holding him against me. From the darkness, the footsteps started again. Slow, heavy, inside the house. This time, coming straight toward us. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it would pass us by. But the last thing I heard before everything went black was a rasping breath, right against my ear. "Next time, you'll see me." I woke up on the couch, with the morning sun bleeding through the curtains. Ethan was curled against me, still asleep, though his face was streaked with dried tears. For a second, I thought maybe I'd dreamed it all. The scratching, the voice, the footsteps. Just my mind playing tricks in the dark. But then I looked around. Every lamp in the living room was shattered. The bulbs had burst, tiny shards glittering across the floor like frost. And on the inside of the front door, carved deep into the wood, were the words, "You looked." My stomach turned to stone. Ethan stirred, blinking at the letters. His small hand slipped into mine. "I told you," he whispered. The Parkers returned just before noon. Mrs. Parker's fake smile evaporated the second she saw the door. Mr. Parker's face went gray, like all the blood had drained out of him. He marked her, Ethan said softly, before either of them could speak. My head snapped toward him. Ethan, stop. But Mr. Parker just closed his eyes, pressing a hand to his temple. We should never have left her alone with him in the house. With him, I demanded. My voice was shaking, high and brittle. What is that thing? What's happening to me? Mrs. Parker reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Her voice broke. We didn't mean for this. We thought maybe he'd ignore you if you followed the rule. I laughed, hollow and sharp. Yeah, well, I didn't. And now he knows me. Mr. Parker's jaw clenched. Then you need to leave. Tonight. Don't stay in this town another day. My blood ran cold. You think I'm just going to leave and pretend none of this ever happened? Ethan's tiny voice cut through the tension. You can't get away. Once he marks you, he follows. The room went still. I stared at him, my mouth dry. What do you mean? Follows? Ethan's eyes shimmered with tears. That's what happened to the last babysitter. I felt like the floor dropped out beneath me. The last babysitter? Neither parent answered. That night, I went home. I triple-locked every door, shut every curtain, and left every light on. I told myself I was safe, that whatever lived in the Parkers' house couldn't reach me outside its walls. But at exactly 9 o'clock, my apartment floor creaked. Slow, heavy, footsteps. I couldn't breathe. The sound circled my bed, dragging across the carpet. A whisper slithered out of the shadows. You looked. I clamped a pillow over my head, trembling so hard my teeth rattled. Then came the scratching. On the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards beneath my bed. A symphony of nails. When I dared to open my eyes, there were words carved into the plaster of my bedroom wall. Don't look away. I squeezed my eyes shut, waited. Hours ticked by. The whispers finally faded with the first rays of dawn. But I knew that Ethan was right. You can't escape once he marks you. Days turned into weeks. Every night at 9, the footsteps return. Sometimes they stop at my bedroom door. Sometimes I feel his breath on my neck. And sometimes, in the reflection of the window, I see the faint outline of a man too tall, too thin, with eyes that shine like wet glass. I never turn around. I never speak. But the worst part, lately, I've started to hear Ethan's voice in the dark, crying, begging, and I can't tell if it's really him or if it's the man in the hall, trying to trick me again. So if you ever take a babysitting job in an old house, and the parents forget to tell you the rule, rah! Because once you break it, he never lets you go.